Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him, but he talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver, pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger, no sweating working for the man, alright.
Hey, race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network, and welcome to the Drafting the Circus program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about everything racing. Joining me in the studio, I've got Louise Torres and Richard Youden. Fellas, how we doing tonight?
We're good, thank you.
It's going pretty good.
Going pretty good. Yep. All right. So a pretty exciting show tonight. I've got two guests here that do very different things, but I find both of their work very fascinating. First off, we've got Dan Bley. Dan is a racing artist, and he's also a modeler. He does custom Indycar diecast. You take any car and make it into one of those ones that they just don't produce. So Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here. I'm real honored.
All right. And then our other guest, I've got James Geisler in the house. James is a race historian and an archivist, but he prefers the term nerd, which hey, that's fine with me. Nerd's not a bad thing, but James has compiled an amazing database of open wheel racing stats, American open wheel racing stats. So James, I want to welcome you to the show as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here and talk with fellow racing enthusiasts.
All right, fantastic. Well, before we get to the interview segment, there was a bit of sad news in the racing world again, and that is we've lost another icon of the sport, that being Sir Frank Williams. Frank Williams, he's Formula One team owner. If you're not familiar with him, the man only has 9 constructors championships, 7 drivers championships. And he started out in the late 60s, tried to give Formula One a go with his own team. He ended up merging that team with Walter Wolf. They ran as Wolf Williams for a while, and then those two split. And you'll remember, if you're old enough as me, you'll remember Jody Scheckter and later James Hunt in the Wolf car as Frank Williams went on to do his own thing and started Williams Grand Prix. And he found success rather quickly. He began building his own car in 1978. He was winning races by 1979, and in 1980, he had won his first world championship with Alan Jones behind the wheel. And then from then on, the guy was just an amazing fixture in Formula One for decades. Some of the drivers that came through Williams include, some of the true icons of the sport. We're talking about, Nelson Piquet, Nigel Mansell, Alan Prost, Ayrton Senna, among others. Alan Jones, Clay Regazzoni drove for them for a while, Ricardo Patrese, Terry Boutsen, a lot of great guys drove Williams cars, Juan Montoya, and who can forget Pastor Maldonado, actually was the last guy to win in a Williams car. For a time, Williams was right up there, bouncing the title of supremacy back and forth with McLaren and Ferrari. It was those 3 dominant teams for a number of time, with the occasional Benetton sneaking in here and there and those sort of things. But in later years, the team's forces declined as some of the bigger manufacturers came in, with larger budgets. And but although Williams has maintained a team on the grid, and just very recently, a year ago, they went ahead and sold off the team. And then Frank, of course, in his personal life has had a lot of struggles as well. He was in a motor car accident in 1987, I believe, that left him paralyzed and wheelchair bound for the rest of his life. He lost his wife to cancer in 2013, and but yet he's stayed around and been a stalwart of the sport. So Frank Williams passed away at the age of 79 earlier this week. Now, Richard, among us, you're the one who worked for Frank Williams, and the man, and you think very highly of him. So I'd like you to offer some of your thoughts on. I know you told me the other day that you felt absolutely gutted, which is understandable. So let's talk to you a little bit about some of your experiences with Frank Williams.
Yeah, I mean, the word sort of the phrase legend is used these days to describe somebody that can flip a half-filled bottle of water and make it land the right way up, aren't they? But Frank was a legend of motorsport. There's no other word that can describe the man. And from a personal point of view, when I was growing up in England in the started to get into Formula One in the early 90s, the likes of Nigel Mansell winning the championship in '92 was probably my first real recollection of the sport. And then, the battles between Hill and Schumacher and Hill and Villeneuve and, that sort of golden era of the Camel and the Rothman sponsored, Williams car was really got me into the sport. And, I still will remember my very first day working there in, I think it was 2013, and admittedly the team weren't at the level that they had been 20 years before there, and that certainly wasn't for the lack of effort on Frank's part and everybody else that was involved in the team. It was just the nature of these big constructors and the big manufacturers coming in with double, triple the budgets of a small privateer team that Williams were. And until last year, until they were bought out, and I guess technically you could still consider them a true privateer team, but the guy was pure and simple. He was a racer. And if you ever have a chance to watch the documentary they released a couple of years ago on him, I don't know whether it's on Amazon Prime or Netflix, but I know it is on one of the streaming services. It's a fantastic watch, and he quotes the line from Top Gun. What was it? I have a need for speed, and that was him, through and through. He had a huge amount of respect for drivers and the guys that would push to use an aviation analogy, but you push the envelope of what a car could do. And he embraced that, and he embraced the the people around him that shared that passion. And it was infectious, and that's why so many people went to work every day for him and committed huge portions of their life to work for the man. And when I was there, unfortunately, his wife had passed, and she was a real rock, to him, and she deserved Ginny. She deserves as much credit for the success of the team as Frank did in many ways. But he'd moved into the factory. He lived actually in the factory at the time for care reasons in many ways, and he was always there and he was always around. And if you were ever working on an evening or a weekend, he'd be there with his carers and he'd be going around the factory, and he'd be talking to people and interacting, and really just wanted to be part of it on a daily basis. And considering the physical limitations that he had, that it was very, very inspiring. I don't think there's any other way of looking at it. And time takes its toll, and they did step away from the team last year, but it was on the condition that the team maintained that ethos of a family-owned organization. And I think they've done reasonably well under the current regime to sort of maintain that. And I hope that does maintain going forward, because there is a special romance about the teams like Williams, and it's certainly a great pride that I have that I work there, and actually on my office wall I can look at it now, the sort of photo from when I left there that everybody I worked with sort of signed. And it's a really, really sad time for the sport. And he's left his mark that the very few will match.
Yeah, well put, Richard. Very well put. So Frank Williams definitely will be missed in the sport. And again, it's just one of those icons of when I was growing up. And I watched Williams a whole lot longer than you did, and all these of the major teams. We lost Colin Chapman so early on, and they managed to keep Lotus going for quite a while. And of course, McLaren has they lost Bruce McLaren way back in 1970, and they've been able to continue that. So it's, good on the owners of Williams for keeping that name and keeping that legacy alive. And it's nice to see them actually improving on the track, where they were, just 2 seasons ago, they were perennially last. And now they're actually, they're getting some points here and there and making a respectable run of things. So, good luck to the Williams team in the future. And again, all the friends and family of Frank Williams have our sympathy. So let's get on to our interview segment, because like I say, I've got 2 very exciting guests. And Dan Bley, let's start with you. So you are the proprietor of Dan Bley Racing Art. You do primarily custom die-cast of Indy cars, but I have seen some of your paintings and sketches and drawings, which are equally brilliant. And for me, as a kid, I love to draw race cars. I love to build models, right? But I've never been able to accomplish anything on the level of perfection that I see in some of your work. So how did you first get into racing and modeling?
Well, first of all, Richard, my condolences to you in regards to Sir Frank Williams. Where I got started was, I've always been a fan of IndyCar racing. I can remember like 1985. I think that was like my first real memory of it. Danny Sullivan's Spin and Win. I remember that. And then my dad took me to the Grand Prix of Denver in 1990, and I was just floored. I couldn't believe all the colors and the sounds and even the smell of the tires and methanol and everything like that. And it just really left a huge impression on me. So that's where it all started. As far as, I started drawing like right around that time. In high school, I would draw nothing but Indy cars, and that's just kind of where I wanted to go. After high school, I ended up going to art school in Phoenix, and I ended up lasting about a year there, and then I left because a guy got shot on my front lawn, so I didn't feel safe. So I came back here, and I kept drawing and everything like that, and I needed to get a real job. So that's what I ended up doing. But I lay tile for a living. I guess the drawing kind of went away for a little while. And then for a bit, I was doing models and, things like that. It was, I guess, as far as die-casts go, it's only been like the last 15 years that I've been doing them, but it's by far my favorite. Definitely pays better than drawing for sure, but it's also cool, seeing heroes. Like I've given stuff to Scott Dixon, Sebastian Bourdais, Greg Ray. I got one for Simona Di Silvestro. Although I'll probably end up giving it to her next year at Indy. But yeah, it's just been a fun thing to do. And luckily I'm able to share my passion with other people that also share that passion.
Fantastic. Yeah, there is a huge community of die-cast collectors out there, and they, there are a lot of things that they just want that are not produced. And there's, guys like you and a few others that are just so skilled at, creating those die-casts that don't exist. So when you make these, Dan, do you, obviously it's probably easy to start from purchase the autograph car, which is, totally white. But at the same time, I've noticed that sometimes it's actually cheaper to just find one that was maybe not very widely sold, or, didn't sell very well and overproduced, ones that were popular. I mean, I saw a guy trying to unload cases and cases of 2015 Carlos Munoz cars, selling for $30 a case, which is $5 a car, which is
Yeah, I
pretty
got some of
cheap.
those.
So did you? Yeah. So do you? I mean, do you prefer to start with a blank slate, or does it just not bother you at all to start with a donor card with something else on it?
No, it doesn't really matter. For the most part, all of them are stripped. You take it apart, you strip it, wash it off really good, and then you can start the series of painting and, like priming, color coat, things like that. And then once you're done with that, you get the decal kit, decal it up, and, there's different processes for different ones, but it doesn't really bother me if it's an autograph car or not. Most of them, I'd say like 80% of them get stripped.
All right, very interesting. Yeah, so we will get back to you. I want to talk to you a little bit more of that, but I want to bring James into the conversation because James, you have compiled this crazy database where you have these IndyCar stats dating all the way back to the AAA era, and you've got stats by number of races, by type of racetrack, by U.S. state, by country, by it's like almost anything. It seems like every time there's a race, you'll publish a post and just come up with this crazy stuff. So, how did you first become interested in just the researching all the numbers of it?
Well, of course, it started with just loving racing. Period. Gotta have that love to spark it. But I love history of all sorts. And if there's a particular part of history that gets that spark, I just can't stop learning. And I just got to learn everything about it that I can. And mix that with, I've always been into math and statistics and numbers and numerology and stuff like that. So it just kind of came together, I probably have more, as you were saying, with American open wheel racing. But at one time, I had just about as much on pre-war Grand Prix racing. I just love the really old stuff, but unfortunately, this was back when I got my first computer and I wasn't savvy about backing up. And I unfortunately lost all that, and I just kind of didn't get back to that. So that was a bummer. But yeah, I just want to try to know everything that I can about something I love.
So what's your research process? I know most of the more current modern era stuff is pretty easy to find, but we're talking about like the early. You talk about the pre-war Grand Prix racing. We talk about the early days of American open wheel racing, and there's some dispute here and there as to what really counts as an IndyCar race and what doesn't, because you have the AAA, and I believe there was another competing organization. I think it was called the ADA? Yeah. So how do you kind of factor those stats into what you should include and what you don't include?
I'm a fact-based driven person. At least I try to. And it doesn't really matter if you're trying to know the history of racing or want to learn the history of the bicycle or any wars or anything like that. I think it's very important to base your opinion on stuff that was written by the people at the time as it was happening. Because anything written after that has a little bit of bias, or maybe they're just not, themselves don't know the whole story. So I go out, I try to find old newspaper articles, which now with the internet has become a lot easier. A lot of your big universities and museums and publishers have digitized all their archives. So being able to go onto their websites, find old articles from the early 1900s, and you come across things that were actually published by the AAA saying, these are the races that's going to go towards the championship. And that's, what you pretty much have to go by. And as you were saying, it's a pretty messy history. A few people would come along and they would try to do the right thing, trying to get organized with all the info, but they would kind of go off on a tangent and start including stuff that they personally thought should be included and didn't really go by what was published at the time for those years, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that does make sense because they're like, again, like we said, there's competing organizations, and there really wasn't an IndyCar series at the time, and it really wasn't established as an IndyCar. But you figure, I guess, if this type car was racing at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, it could be considered an IndyCar, and again, the rules for what can race at the Indianapolis Speedway were pretty wide open at the time as well.
Right. Yeah. And in the early years, it's actually heavily driven by the world, believe it or not. What became the FIA started as the International Association of Recognized Automobile Clubs. It was established in June of 1904. And what would happen is all of your major sanctioning bodies or clubs from all around the world would come together in one place and basically have a congress or a meeting, and they would hash out all the categories of the cars. This is class A, this is class B, this is, so on and so forth. And for the first couple of years, it was the ACA that represented North America, and they kind of had a falling out with the AAA, and eventually the AAA took their spot within that Congress. And so all these clubs from around the world would try to get their regulations as close as possible between the classes, so anyone in Europe could come to America and pretty much race in all the big races without changing their car very much, and vice versa. So that's kind of how the top rung of American automobile racing came to be, was trying to get all these European cars to come over as well to compete. So the AAA would say, okay, this is what would basically be Class A in Europe, and these are the races that are going to go towards the championship.
Right. So then Class A in Europe would be what they would call Grand Prix racing. Am I correct there?
Yeah,
Sort of.
kind of. Grand Prix racing started as kind of an overall for a race. And it's kind of like endurance racing today. There'd be more than one class actually in that race, but you'd have the overall winner getting the grand prize, which was usually the Class A, of course.
Yeah, it's really very interesting because I was reading one of your posts one day, and I was surprised to find that the Pikes Peak Hill Climb was actually considered an points-paying IndyCar race under the AAA for a while.
Yeah, it kind of went off and on there for a while. I'm not really quite sure. I haven't nailed down what kept it from being a points-paying race intermittently, but yeah, there were a few years there where it was included within the championship.
Yeah, it's all very interesting stuff. Even when you get into the USAC kart era, when kart was showing that you had the bulk of the races, but at the same time, USAC still crowned a national champion, and then for a while they crowned what they call the Gold Crown champion, and the only race left on USAC was the Indianapolis 500. So at some point they decided that the Gold Crown champion was still the Gold Crown champion, but not the national champion, because the national champion would be whoever won the kart championship, which is pretty muddy in itself there, exactly. They even threw a dirt track onto the USAC schedule in the early 80s just to, have enough races to call it a championship.
Exactly. And, it's kind of goes back to what we were saying before. You have in your opinion of what should be an IndyCar race, but when you look at the nuts and bolts of it, USAC was the sanction of the Indianapolis 500, and they said these other dirt races were going to go towards that national championship. So it's kind of hard to deny that they weren't IndyCar races,
Right. So, all right. Now, Dan, I want to get back to you for a little bit. So when we're talking about IndyCar diecast, right? So we've had a couple of different pretty good manufacturers in the past, right? I used to like the old Action ones. I thought Action did a good job. I thought Ertl did a good job, right? I thought Racing Champions made toys, but they for a while that was all you get. But right now, the predominant manufacturer is Greenlight. Well, that's the only person producing current Indy cars, and I guess there are. I do like the green lights, but there's things about the green lights that just piss me off. Like like why is this steering wheel look like a road car steering wheel? Why couldn't you just mold a little piece of plastic in the more of the rectangle shape of the IndyCar?
Right.
Actually, so like when you're doing these your custom diecast, do you like change out parts of the cars? I know some guys do some things with 3D printing to do new wings or the the steering wheels or suspension components, or even put on new wheels and tires. Do you do a lot of that when you're doing a full conversion?
Yeah. For a lot of my stuff, it's all commissioned work, so it kind of depends on how much they want to spend. But if I'm going all out, yeah, I'll get new steering wheels. Might even try to do a driver figure if it has kind of a basic helmet. Mirrors, from like 2003 to 2011, they were able, on the real cars, they were able to kind of experiment with different things. So yeah, I'll definitely buy steering wheels, things like that, and just to make it more real for sure. Especially on the new ones, like they come with a round wheel, and they haven't used round wheels in forever and a day. But I'll also put on like little decals for like the tear offs on the windshields and things like that. It's all about these little, pieces of detail that make it really interesting and, likable, I guess. It's, yeah.
So some of your things are really amazing. I've looked at some of yours where you've done the the race version, where it looks like you put like the splatter on the sides of the car, make the car look nice and dirty as it would have looked in Victory Lane. I was looking at the Elio Castro Neves one you did, from the Indy 500. It's just amazing. The amount of detail you put in there. So now
thanks. Yeah, the Connor Daly I made, the race version with the big black mark on the nose and all that. That's one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, it's those little things. You won't find Greenlight making that, but it's just nice that there's guys out and really, I mean, you say it depends on what somebody wants to spend, but I look at what you're charging for a custom diecast, right? Which is anywhere from $275 to $400 from what I can gather, and I just imagine the amount of time you put into that. And I'm almost wondering if you're underselling yourself, because when you think about that, that's $300. That's kind of a bargain for the product you're putting out.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. No, I mean, there's some people that charge more. There's some people that charge less. I think this is just kind of like a middle of the road thing where, it's definitely come up in a few years. But right now I'm busy enough to where I want to be. And my reputation is pretty good, and I'm very flattered to be considered one of the best. There's a lot of good artists out there, and I'm happy to be among them.
Yeah. Now, Louise, you have a question?
Yeah, yes, I do. When it comes to, of course, you make all those custom diecast liveries and all. I remember hearing from somebody at the what they call it at the Indianapolis thing during the month of May, the convention where they have all those the memorabilia show, I think it was called. Where I think, if I remember, there's one other artist that was told that makes kind of like Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan ones exclusively just for teams. Do you also do stuff that is just for teams only and not for sale?
Yeah, so that's Eric Hensley. He's really, really good. I don't make things for teams. I just really don't have the time. I haven't really had that many requests either. There's times where, I was going to make like last year, I was going to make about 8 for a specific team, and things kind of fell through, and that was kind of a bummer. But it would have created a lot of work, and with my real job, which is construction, tile setting, and family life, it's just not in the cards right now for me to do that. In about 3 years, we might be able to move to Indy, and I might not be doing construction then. So we'll see what happens in the future. There's a lot of things that can happen in 3 years. So we'll just see what happens.
Most certainly, and for sure, best of luck. I'm still contemplating about my side of things in my career, whether or not I'll head down to Indy or Charlotte or out of nowhere, Southern California, to figure something out, because I'm from the state of Washington, and of course, being out west, there's so much I could do down there from a motorsports side of things. But yeah, most certainly the best of luck in that regard. I was just curious if you had any moments where you try to make stuff for team specific that are team specific.
Yeah, not really yet. So, but that's okay.
It's okay. You're busy enough now. Yeah. But I do wish you luck on hopefully that one day you'll be able to walk away from the day job and just, pursue your passion. So, yeah, I wish
that
you
would be awesome.
Yeah. That's the dream for everybody. Right. So now, yeah. James, I want to bring you back into the conversation now, speaking of all the stats you've compiled, now are you able to share that anywhere other than, posting on social media? What I'm like, do you have plans to, maybe compile everything in a book or a database that other folks can access?
I did it for my own personal, because, if I see something happening, I'd be like, oh, has this happened before, type of situation. I'd be able to look it up pretty quickly. But there's a couple of people who's asked me or trying to push me to do some books, especially around the different tracks and stuff. But I don't know. I don't have too much confidence in myself as far as that's concerned. I think if I try to do a book, it'd just be a mess, because I know how I go off on tangents when I'm just talking. I can't even imagine trying to get organized with chapters in a book or whatever. But I have thought about maybe starting up a website, possibly. I know I have shared some of my spreadsheets with some friends through Google, the Google Drive format, which I think is kind of cool. But yeah, down the road, I might start a web page if I can get into that.
I think what you have to offer is pretty amazing, because there are, a couple of other informational type things out there, like Champ Car Stats is still there. Mark Dill does the first super speedway. And he's got a large archive collection of articles and whatnot. And, I just really think that as I read your stuff, some of your stuff is just more interesting when you get into all these other little details that people don't think about. One of my other things that I really like that you do is the, Indycar, what do you call it? The Indycar track graveyard.
Right.
Where you'll give us some stats on a track that, some of us may have never heard of, and there were so many tracks in the United States or, converted horse racing tracks. There were wood plank tracks. There were street courses that are no more, ovals that are no more. You've compiled these stats for these, tracks that are no longer existent. And I really think that, honestly, when you say you're not organized, I would say some of this stuff that I read that you put out there is some of the most organized stuff I've ever seen. So it sounds like you just might need the services of a good a ghostwriter to help you out, like like a Jade Gerst or somebody like that, to help you put all the things in it. Because I think you'd be successful with it. Because I really enjoy reading your stuff.
I really appreciate the kind words, and it's when I came across the Elite IndyCar group on Facebook, finally found a group that I was like, hey, some of these people might be interested in this info. So I just kind of started throwing it out there. But yeah, I don't
No,
know.
yeah. Now I wanted to ask you about I don't know what I guess I will call like disputed stats. Like I recall you and I were having a discussion one time on social media of how many pole positions Ryan Briscoe had, right? Because he had won a pole in Long Beach, and that was when Chevrolet decided to do the unprecedented move and yank all 11 Chevrolet cars engines and give every Chevrolet driver a 10 plates grid penalty. So we were trying to decide, even though he won the pole on Saturday, but he started from 11th, was that still a pole position? And I think you and I mutually agreed that he still had earned the pole, and that pole position belonged in the stats. But are there other examples of that so-called disputed stats? I mean, when you get into, sometimes pole positions are set by practice times or sometimes by point standings. How does all that figure in when you're calculating number of wins and number of poles and number of starts for folks?
Well, it's a big headache. But it basically comes down to what the sanction, their final word, is basically what I go by. And in that situation with Ryan Briscoe, I had thought I had seen where IndyCar had not given him the designation of being the pole winner. But I was able to find the PDF archive of, I can't remember what it was. I think it was the starting grid, and it had a note at the bottom from IndyCar saying what the situation was, and he was able to keep the pole designation, but he didn't start on the pole. So in the end, it basically comes down to what the sanction, their final word is, but I just sometimes have to sniff it out a little bit harder than other situations.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of them here and there where you just and then there's what I like to call revisionist history. Like, there are folks that will tell you Tony Stewart was the pole sitter for the 596, but he didn't win the pole. He started from pole, but he didn't win the pole, and that's that's another one that just it's odd that some folks just don't seem to remember that. Scott Brayton had lost his life the week before, and Scott Brayton was the rightful pole sitter.
Right. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. You have to go with fact. It's great to have an opinion on stuff. Everyone has it, but you shouldn't let that get in the way of what really happened. And of course, we see that a lot with Paul Tracy versus the Elio in the Indy 500.
Yeah.
We all know whose name is on the trophy.
Yes, we do. Yeah. And I often wonder to myself, if Paul Tracy had won that race, if he would not become the insufferable ass that he is, but the world will never know.
From what I heard, he was that way before. So
this is quite true, as AJ Foy would say. This is quite true. Now, Louise, you have another question?
Yeah, speaking of that, I mean, it's not often that you get sacked by Penske more than once, so there's that too for Paul, regarding Paul. But yeah, it reminds me when you bring it up, like who's the pole and all that. I know just recently in F1, Lewis Hamilton was still recognized as the pole sitter despite that grid spot penalty he got just recently. So there's always that.
But that's pretty clear in the rules, though, isn't it? That one, I think, the way they, determine who is the actual pole sitter, and then the penalties are assessed at a certain time. It's whenever the penalty is assessed. If the penalty is assessed before qualifying, then he would lose the pole. But if the penalty is assessed for like an engine change post qualifying, then you still maintain it. In that case, the pole award.
Yeah, for sure. Because it reminds me to some ways like who gets pole. Because I remember when Dixon won the Indy 500 pole, if I recall correctly, that was his first outright pole since 2017 or so at Indy as well. So it had been a long while, even though he started on pole once or twice because of owner points, because of qualifying being washed out, to my knowledge. So yeah, it's not. I'd imagine it's not an easy progress. Kind of like debating stuff or realizing some of them are factual. Some of them it's just it's because of this. This so and so happened. I know there's one person that acknowledges willpower is like X amount of poles plus one, and that plus one being a Surfers Paradise. But that was just because it was an exhibition race in 08. It's not part of the championship trail at the time.
Yeah, then the other one where the stats are disputed is Vegas 2011, where they just canceled the race, and then that's so any stat from that race, we're talking laps led, pole, those sort of things are all just erased. Now, James, you have thoughts on the Vegas 2011 and the stats from the portion of the race they ran?
I personally agreed with wiping it away. If anything, I would have let I think it was Tony Kanaan won the pole, if I'm not mistaken. I would have been okay with still giving him the pole because that was before the whole tragic situation happened. But I mean, no one really wanted to be there in the first place, and then when the tragedy happened, it was just like, okay, let's get this behind us a little bit. But if you don't mind me backtracking a little bit.
No, go right ahead.
The Indy 500, if we're going to talk about things that's been debated, I think there's one that hasn't been debated but should. This goes all the way back to the inaugural running, 1911. Most people will say that there's been 783 Indy 500 drivers. I would like to contend that there's 784. Mr. Burt Adams was the unfortunate odd man out because of the disagreement between Ray Haroon and Ralph Mulford of who actually won. But Mr. Burt Adams actually started in the car number 23, who all box scorers give as Mel Marquette being the driver. But we know Mel Marquette finished the race, but it was Burt Adams who actually started in the car. And almost every racing organization through time pretty much has said the driver who started it, is the driver of the car, even if he gets relief sometime during the race or whatever. But unfortunately, with the whole Ray Haroon versus Ralph Mulford situation, once they finally declared Ray Haroon as the winner, they destroyed the records. And unfortunately, when they did that, it erased Burt Adams as an Indy 500 driver. Because everyone stopped looking at it.
That's one I've never heard. I mean, there's always the debate about relief drivers who just drive a middle stint, and of course, Cyrus Patchke's name comes up a lot. He drove two relief stints in the first race, one for Ray and one for Joe Dawson. And those guys are generally not credited at all until recently. There's been a bit of a movement to kind of recognize those guys. But yeah, I had never heard of the gentleman you just mentioned because, in most cases, if one guy starts and another guy finishes, they're both credited. And that explains your two double faces on the Borg Warner.
Yeah, and there's talking about relief drivers. There's been 61 drivers who drove in relief, but never actually got an official start in the Indy 500. Burt Adams, unfortunately, doesn't fall into that category. He was just completely forgotten about, basically.
Poor guy. All right, so now, Dan, I want to go back to you for a bit. And I'm kind of interested to know what's the most common request that you have for a custom diecast? I would imagine it's something as simple as getting Marlboro conversions because most, those were not produced after the tobacco settlement and whatnot. And then they started making the Penske diecast just plain white. Is that your most common one, or is there's something else?
It kind of depends. Like whenever I post a picture somewhere, there's people, like that, like a Power Team Kenny Brack. That one's real popular. Then I posted Achiever winner for 98, and that was pretty popular too. Not like the Brack though, but there's always Penske's and stuff like that I'm doing. It just kind of depends. I get a lot of requests for a 91 mirrors, but man, I think Replicars is going to come out with that. So I would just suggest to everybody just wait for it.
Yeah, it's hard. Well, it's hard to find a donor car for 91 mirrors, is it not?
Oh, they don't make them.
Yeah, so Steve, you're talking, you're doing a lot of ground up stuff right there.
Yeah, adding a lot of putty and things like that. And I have one. Well, I have two, but
well, of course
yeah.
you do. Yeah,
it's a lot of work. yeah, I got like, geez, I think I have like 400 cars downstairs.
You see, and my wife gets mad at me for my just 100 or so.
Oh, you want another?
Oh no, it's I tell you, it's kind of funny because, like, you know, sometimes people and you'll understand this, and most race fans that like diecast will understand this, right? You know, that my wife could look at it and say, why you keep buying these things? They just sit there in the wall in a case. I said, yes, but when I'm sitting here, I like to look at them. You know what I mean? It gives me joy just to look at these, you know, model cars. And you know, like I say, when I was a kid, I used to love to build plastic models. You know, the Tamiya ones were my favorite, and because they were so detailed, and they would come out so nice.
Great kits.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say my wife has kind of embraced the whole car thing as of late, so that's pretty cool.
My wife doesn't give me too much of a hard time, but she's like every Indy 500, I've been picking up a new diecast. So, but she,
Nice.
but she loves, she won't watch a race with me on TV, but she'll go to the race with me all the time. She loves it.
Very cool.
She loves all the pageantry of it. Carb Day is her favorite. Usually the concert there will feature a couple of bands that we really like, and just to being around the crowd of people and being part of that. I mean, if you've never been to the Indy 500, my God, it's an experience that you want to just keep going to year after year after year. And then the first year I took her was 2005, and then she's been hooked ever since. Like I said, she won't watch a race on TV, but yeah, she'll be like counting down the Indy 500. So
nice,
which is all good stuff. So now now Dan, you're a family man, right? Have you been able to kind of share your passion with your son at all?
Oh yeah, for sure. He's actually doing pretty well with it. He's made about like 4 cars now, and he listens to what I tell him to do, and he asks questions, and he's willing to take the time to do things what I consider correct, and he's willing to not rush through it, which is kind of unlike him in other things. But with this, yeah, he's able to do a good job. He even sold one about a month ago, and he was pretty proud of that. So yeah, I'm proud of him. He's a good kid.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Now, this is the time in the show where I generally say, Richard, you've been quiet over there. You've been quiet over there. So do you have any questions for Dan or for James?
I think it's fascinating, listening to the two of you. I mean, I have I've got a few model, sort of cars at home, but they're typically shop bought ones. I hate to say, and I did sort of say I'll only ever buy cars that win races that I've worked on, and I wouldn't have many of those if that was the case. But I have a few more than that, and. No, I love, I must admit, I think for a lot of engineers and a lot of technically minded people, the precision and the details of these models is something that they find sort of addictive. And I do have a few, and so hopefully we'll get back into it in the near future, and be able to collect a few more of them. But I think it's fascinating, especially the specials and the one-offs, and I think as Frank mentioned there, some of the collectible ones now are obviously the ones that have been the sort of the pre-tobacco banning from the even models. I know some of the sort of Formula One cars from the 80s and 90s are very collectible and run $400, $500, $600 for some of the originals. Like the Williams Rothmans and Camel cars that we were mentioning earlier.
For sure.
They're fantastic to look at. They really are.
Yep. Yeah, even the Tyrrell, the six wheeler. That one.
Oh
one's a
yes,
great
yeah.
car.
Yeah.
Oh
They,
yeah,
even Hot Wheels made one. I'm not sure where it went though.
Yeah, because the big, I think if I'm right, the big sort of European distributor is Minishop. And I remember when I was with Williams, they dropped the ball on it one year and didn't send everything off in time to get a model produced, so they had to go to another manufacturer. And they still did a pretty good job of it. But yeah, I've got one of those. I've got a Valtteri. I'm actually looking at it now. Which one's that? I've got a Valtteri Bottas from 20. Hang on, let me have a look at it. Yeah, about 2013, I think it was. Yeah, it's a non-branded Spark model, I think, and they still did a pretty good job, but they're not as detailed as the Mini Shop ones.
Yeah, Mini Champs is great for sure.
Yeah, they did some good stuff. I've got some earlier Formula Ones because they for a while they were doing some historical ones. I've got a Francois Sievert one that's really nice. The 143rd. I mean, I prefer a 118th, but Mini Champs makes some really nice 143rds.
I have a Sergio Perez Racing Point. I might get the Red Bull one for this Christmas, and a Rubens Barrichello Braun one out of pity because there's this one guy that as a joke they gave him a Barrichello Braun instead of a Jensen Button. He's a big Button guy. It got so upset over it. It's like, oh, I feel so bad for Rubens. I'll go get one on eBay. But yeah, for me with Indy cars, like primarily like the 143, I'm into the fully branded tobacco custom or original. In fact, I have the Unser Junior 94 143rd when I was there at Indy in this past May.
I think I also probably for IndyCar and I guess IndyCar and probably NASCAR would be even more. They run so many different sponsorship schemes and sort of branding throughout the season that I guess at times it could be difficult to keep up with some of them really.
My understanding of that, and our friend Seth is big NASCAR diecast collector. Whenever they're like somebody wins a race, let's here pre-order this race use edition. But from what I understand, like a large percentage of these are never actually produced. If they don't get enough pre-orders, they just don't make it.
Yeah.
So
that's the thing.
We got a few when I was with Childress. We've got I've got a few here in my office that were done in sort of the 2016 sort of time frame when they were pumping them out, and they were just basically giving them away because they couldn't sell them. But yeah, you could go through like each car each team would have sometimes a dozen a season of different liveries, and nobody's going to buy them. They may buy the one or two favorite ones, but they're certainly not going to buy 15 diecast models of these things from one season.
Unless it's somebody prominent. Like I know Dale Jr. sold a lot of his diecast and whatnot, but yeah, if you're talking you want every livery that
Austin Dillon
ran. Yeah. So now, James, I want to bring you back into the conversation because, as I'd mentioned earlier before, I enjoy your IndyCar track graveyard thing. So when you compile these stats, you also compile the stats of how many races have been on each track. And I was just kind of curious, over the years, not of the current tracks, but any track, what are the tracks that have hosted the most IndyCar races other than obviously the Speedway?
Number 2 would be the Milwaukee Mile. Well, Indianapolis has hosted 129 IndyCar races. The Milwaukee Mile is at 113. And
I miss that track.
Oh yeah, I think we all do. We all know that. I hope it never goes away completely.
Yeah,
it's kind of scaring me a little bit.
Yep.
But after that,
Let's
you
be
got,
fortunate. Arca ran there just last year, so it's still a lot of running. But of course, yeah, the IndyCar would be very beneficial to have it back.
oh yeah,
Fingers
Um,
crossed.
right. After that, you have Phoenix International at 64 races, Michigan with 56, Trenton with 55, Mid Ohio 38, Long Beach 37, Exhibition Place in Toronto with 35, which might be a little bit surprising, especially the last couple of years we haven't been able to go there with COVID. Um, Texas Motor Speedway at 34, and rounding out the top 10 is Langhorne at 33.
Langhorne, yeah, that's an interesting place. Buddy of mine, Mike Yoakum, him and I do these Lost Tracks of IndyCar podcast every now and again. We did an episode about Langhorne. So, and we did an episode on Trenton also. Trenton was one of the more interesting layouts out there when they put the kidney bean layout out there. So you're literally talking an oval that's got a right turn in it, you know, in the middle of the backstretch. And when I was a kid, I got to go to Trenton once, and it was 1978, and Mario actually won that race. He was just coming off winning the Formula One championship and jumped back in for an IndyCar ride. I just remember the weirdest memory that I still hold on to was that they used a Volkswagen Scirocco as the pace car, which oddly enough, my first several cars when I was young were Volkswagens. I'm a fan of Volkswagen, so I thought that was the coolest thing. That was almost cooler than Mario winning. The race I went to was a Scirocco for a pace car. Yeah, but yes, it's kind of sad as all these tracks kind of fade away. When you see places like Bridgehampton, where they preserved the bridge and a part of the front stretch that they keep there on the golf courses there now. So it's
Right.
But other tracks, there's like no trace of them.
Yeah, losing Syracuse really hurt. That was the last track that was part of the very first IndyCar season of 1905, and it's just sad. People don't realize the history that they're losing. I mean, that first 1905 season was the very first known multi-event points championship in motor racing. So that pretty much set what we have now in all over the world, a points-based system. And Syracuse was the very last one to be in existence, and they just got rid of it. So, yeah.
How long ago did they get rid of that?
I think that was that 2014, I think it was.
So not that awful long ago. Yeah, it's a shame.
And then the Indianapolis Fairgrounds just got, I think, graveled over. The track is still there, but I think they put gravel over the top of the racing surface. So there's still hope maybe that can go back to dirt and we won't lose it completely, but that'd be another one that it would really hurt to see that one go away. That's where Carl Fisher ran at his very first race. So without that, who knows where we would be? Would he have gotten that spark to create the Indianapolis Motor Speedway? What would have happened?
Yeah, the world will never know. Yeah. So, but and to look at a place like Nazareth, to see it just sitting there rotting away. When Nazareth has a longer history than some people realize, because it was there in the 50s, and they for a while they had the two ovals side by side. They had a half-mile oval right next to the 1 mile oval, both dirt tracks. But now it's just because I used to live in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, when I worked in Allentown, but I would always take the long way to work and drive through Nazareth just so I could drive by the track every day. Just because I'm weird, but that's when the track was still operating and I could go to an IndyCar race there once a year. But this property developer has bought this thing, and he just sat on that property for years, and it's just it looks like an episode of History Channel's Life After People, where it's just, the weeds have overgrown the track and whatnot. So,
Right. Of
yeah,
course, that's where Mario Andretti and Aldo got to see their first racing in North America.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, if you don't want to preserve that, I mean, what do you want to save? So, all right. So we are right up at the end of our hour. So my gosh, it's been fascinating talking to you both. Dan, let me give you a few moments to plug your social media presence.
All right, cool. Yeah, you guys can find me on Facebook. That's where I'm most active. Search Dan Bley Racing Art. Last name is spelled Bley. I'm also on Instagram, Dan Bley Racing Art again. I even have a Twitter account, which is Dan Bley Racing Art, but I'm not active in it a whole lot. So Facebook is by far the best way to get a hold of me.
All right. Now, James, I know you post all of your stuff after every race on the group in Facebook called Elite IndyCar. Do you publish your stats elsewhere?
Nope, that's it.
Nope, that's it. So go on Facebook, join Elite IndyCar, which is a fantastic group, and you'll like it. I tell you, I'm one of the admins of the group, so I can speak to that great community of people who enjoy racing history, and without a lot of drama to speak of. And some of these, Lord, some of these Facebook groups, I mean, especially the NASCAR ones, I just cringe at stuff I read. So, but I enjoy all the people at Elite IndyCar, which is where I met both you, Dan, and James.
Yep.
So,
yep. Great site. Great page.
So well, with that being said, we are out of time. So I want to thank you, Dan. I want to thank you, James. I want to thank you, Louise and Richard. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and YouTube. But most of all, I want to thank you folks who listen to us week in and week out. But until next week, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.